using the Pathfinder panel in InDesign. So the Pathfinder panel is essentially a drawing tool. Let's go ahead and open it. Under the window method menu, you're going to see that you don't find Pathfinder listed here. It is located under the object and layout area, and then we're going to go to Pathfinder. So you may be familiar with Pathfinder from Illustrator. It looks similar, but it is not the same. So there are 3 sections, or InDesign says it's divided into 3 sections. Really, you're seeing 4. You see a Pathfinder, and then convert shape and convert point. So as far as functionality, the paths really is one area, Pathfinder a second, and the convert area a third. So let's just look at these different options here and see what they can do. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this over. I'm going to open up layers, and I'm going to make a new layer, turning off this original layer so that I can work with just some paths, because we're going to look at the first section here. So we'll tuck that back away. I'm going to go to my pen tool. I'm going to make sure that my fill is set to none and my stroke is set to black. So I need to just swap this. I'm going to use my swap icon to swap. So now if I click and click, I have one path. I'm going to use my control key to deselect, go back and click again, control key to deselect. So what I have here are 2 paths. They're 2 individual paths. We can zoom in a little bit so that you can see this. And I actually can select both of them here and increase the points so that you can see them even better. So the first option here in Pathfinder under the path section is join path, and it connects 2 endpoints. So if I have, with my direct selection tool, directly click the last 2 points here, notice the anchor points become filled, where over here they're hollow or they're white. So with these 2 selected, I can click this first option to join, and basically it connects with the straight line. So those 2 endpoints are then joined. Pretty simple. I can do the same thing over here and join. Okay, so now I have basically a square. Now this next option, I'm going to select my shape here with my selection tool. The next one here basically opens up a closed path. So if I click it, it's going to pick one of these points. It's going to default, I believe, in the top left, but if I have one selected, it will use that, and it opened it up. So it basically, I moved them to show you, but it basically just cuts it. So I end up with 2 anchor points, one on top of another, and it becomes separate. This next option closes an open path. So again, it's just going to create a straight line from those 2 points, the starting point and the end point, in an open shape. Okay, so those are some nice options. This last one reverses it. This would be if you had, say, a path with arrows or specific end point with the start or the end point, you could reverse it. That could also affect your stroke style, something we'll talk about at a later time. So that's the paths section of this Pathfinder panel. All right, let's go back to layers now. Turn off this layer and turn on my layer with some shapes. So we are going to actually use this document and look at some of these other features that we have. So the next section here is called Pathfinder. And basically this Pathfinder section, the second one down, has 5 different options here to create new complex shapes. And basically it does that by overlapping objects. So I have to overlap objects. This area right here will probably be most familiar to Illustrator if you have used that as a tool. So let's start with the add. The add basically combines selected objects into one shape. So if we need to move this over, and I'm going to actually move it 2 inches, I could go under my object and move and specify 2 inches, or I could just change my X location by adding 2. I press the tab key, it moves it over. This one's going to be a -2, which right now it's at 5. So if I subtract 2, I'm going to get 3. And it should take me to where I need it to be. Okay, so with the selection tool, I select everything that's involved, and so you have to have at least 2 or more overlapping objects, and when I click add, it converts it into 1. Okay, I'll undo that a second. Notice that it takes the attributes of the frontmost object. There's the add. The next one is subtract, and so it subtracts the frontmost objects from the backmost object. So again, we're going to move this over 2. We'll do 2, and this one is a -2, so I'll take this 2 from the 6 here and get 4. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to subtract this. Now if I maybe moved this a little bit too much. Let's go, instead of a full 2, 1.5. So let's add a half here to each one of these. Okay, so now if I select this whole party here of 3 objects, notice that my backmost object is black. If I subtract, I retain the attributes of that backmost object. And basically the front 2 objects, what we call punch a hole in the backmost object. So again, you have to have minimum of 2, but you can have many more. I don't know that there's a limit. So it's going to punch out or take away those top objects. Let's go to another. And I'm just going to move my green circle over top of my red square, and let's look at the next option here, which is the intersect. So if I select both, intersect, now pay attention to the color, red is in the back, green is in the front, and if I choose intersect, basically the resulting shape is the intersection of the 2 overlapping shapes or objects, and it assumes the color property of the frontmost object. I'll do it one more time here. Okay, so in InDesign, this is gone. You know, in Illustrator, you might remember that you still see the silhouette, and you still it's editable. The individual objects are editable. That is not the case in InDesign. Okay, so that was intersect. Now, if we do the next option here, which is exclude overlapping, a hole is created where the 2 objects overlap, and it assumes the color properties of the frontmost object. So all of them do that except for the subtract, which we're keeping the back object. So if we just kind of keep that in mind, that most of the time you're going to keep the attributes or the color properties of that frontmost object. Okay, so the exclude overlap really is similar to the intersect, except for it's giving me a hole, whereas the intersect kept that overlapping area. All right, and last one down here, we're going to select both again. You always select all parties involved, all of your objects, and the last option here is minus the back. And basically the backmost object punches a hole in the object or objects in front. Okay, so it's really the opposite of the subtract, which was right here, in that it's taking the back object and punching the hole in the front rather than the top punching a hole in the back. And again, it's going to assume the color properties of the frontmost object. If I undo that, you can see that that is certainly the case. So those are the Pathfinder. These are very common. You can get some very interesting shapes that then you can utilize as your frames and use them for images, for text, whatever you may need to do. So that's the Pathfinder. Now the convert shape, let's just undo this so I can get a simple shape here. We'll use this circle. The convert shape area basically converts a shape to another shape. Simple as that. Some of them don't work, one conversion shape to another, so you kind of have to experiment. But I'll show you. This starts with a circle. If we choose square, now we're at a square. If I choose triangle, now we're at a triangle. And so on and so on. Now, the one thing to remember is that you can change this shape to a line, or you can change it to an orthogonal, vertical or horizontal line. But now once I've converted it to a line, I cannot go back to a shape. Okay, so remember that if you can navigate these solid shapes, but once I go to a line, I'm not able to go back. I'm going to do a Control Z to get back here to actually a real shape. Okay, so those are some key things. And then the convert point basically converts points, changes them with the direction handle. So things like a Bezier curve or anchor point to a corner point. So you can utilize basically your convert tool here to do many of those same features. So that's the Pathfinder panel. There's some areas in here that I think you'll find very helpful and will allow you to create some customized drawing objects and drawing shapes in InDesign.